continues to just increase based on the need, based upon just different education and community, creating a safety net. And what we found is like in our more rural counties, they may not have dedicated service providers that can provide assistance to children when they've been identified as going through this victimization. And so we love to step in as much as we can to provide some of that. But our greatest footprint is in within this Mecklenburg County where the city of Charlotte is located, as well as Cabarrus County and Iredell, those counties. It's also just important to note, so if you have questions at the end, we also have able quite a bit of development with other agencies across the United States, as well as we have an office in Kenya, and we have helped develop projects in South Africa and Thailand. So I've had the joy and privilege over the last 17 years to really see trafficking both here domestic wise as well as international in cities, in rural, and quite a bit in this specific work that we're doing. So I know that you guys have talked a lot about human trafficking, but I want to just focus in on one thing that is really important when we look through the lens of present age. We know that sex trafficking occurs when someone causes a minor to commit a commercial sex act or causes an adult to engage in a commercial sex act through force, fraud, or coercion. And the thing that's really important to distinguish is that our federal law, we define as a commercial sex act as anything that includes prostitution, pornography, any type of sexual act done for something of value. And what's important to know is that our federal law says that a minor cannot consent to a commercial sex act. So while various states have ages of consent for sexual activity, when you cross the line of there being some sort of exchange of something of value, money, drugs, shelter, clothing, then you are in grounds for sex trafficking because something of value has been exchanged. Just yesterday, we were talking about one of our active cases with a minor, and she was currently, she was in an elopement. She had run away, and we were talking about trying to find her, where is she at, all the places that we typically look. And in real time, we got a call from her mother who said that she had just been recovered. A police officer had found her actively engaging in what at the time just appeared to be a sex act with an Uber driver. Well, you start asking a few more questions and you realize that she had this Uber driver called and said, "Hey, I'm hungry. Can you take me?" Yes, if we can make an exchange. Well, there was an exchange made. And so it begs to ask that we ask different questions because, first of all, she was 14. She can't consent to sex or commercial sex. And so there begs the question of asking how and why is this taking place? And that's just an example of being able to truly identify, especially when we're talking about our children, what is actually going on. You guys see this all over the news. There's so many national high-profile sex trafficking indictments that are currently active or have been over the last couple of years. But what I like to tell people, especially when we're talking about what's happening in the Charlotte metro region, is that it's happening right here too. Every year we are seeing not only charges, but also cases, whether they're state or federal, that we are seeing children being trafficked into commercial sex for someone else's. So how does present age combat it head on? We truly look at a multi-tiered approach when we're looking at this. So really, if we look at two primary buckets, we have our education and training programs and our intervention and restoration programs. I'm going to explain a little bit about what those are and then give you a little bit more detail about that. Education and prevention is at the heartbeat of what we do. When you've worked with children as young as we've had young children as young as 6 years old that we worked with. And so when you see the depth of the trauma and the complexity and the nuances of walking through their healing journey with them, you begin to want to do anything in your power to prevent that from happening to another child. And so early on, Present Age has been around for 17 years. And about 2 or 3 years into operations, we began to develop curriculum for not only elementary age kids, but also for middle school kids. In the state of North Carolina, we have Senate bills that require the education of certain topics, sexual abuse prevention, human trafficking prevention within the public school system. And so we began working with the Department of Instruction to figure out how we could get curriculum into these places. We got together with subject matter experts along with survivors that had come through our program to cultivate programs. Because of that, we also get the privilege to be able to provide professional development to partners here locally. So every year we provide trainings for law enforcement officers, for teachers, for healthcare workers, for social workers, you name it. And so it's a real privilege that we're able to step into those places, both professionally, community, or faith-based places, so that we can provide what we're learning from working directly with survivors as they go on their journeys in order, and then feeding it right back into those professionals who might be able to interrupt that victimization. And then obviously on the flip side of that, we have our intervention and restoration programs. Those are for both those that have experienced victimization of sexual abuse as well as trafficking. And one of the reasons we expanded our programming is because we realized that the most prevalent the most prevalent vulnerability that we were seeing in our children was a history of sexual abuse. And so now we have established relationships with our school systems, with DSS, YFS, our court system. And so if they're starting to see signs like history of sexual abuse and abandonment from a parent, substance abuse, things like that, we know that that is just layering on the vulnerability for that child to be targeted and groomed. And so we want to get them into programming and into support and create a safety net around them as soon as possible so that we can prevent continued victimization. And you can see number wise, we talk to thousands and tens of thousands of people every year with our and training, both in our school systems as well as in the community. And historically, over the life of Present Age, we have served over 1,000 children who have been victims of sexual exploitation or trafficking. So, wanted to tell you about our two custom curriculums that we have. One of them is kindergarten through fifth grade, and this is in response to one of our state legislative requirements to teach on child sexual abuse prevention. And it currently is in 4 school systems, and we are actively talking to about 6 to 8 more currently to roll that out hopefully in 2026. And the thing that I love about this is that we aren't talking about just sexual abuse. We're teaching children language about establishing safe boundaries and healthy responses. There is one thing that we learned over and over and over is that when we are talking with 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds about their sex trafficking victimization, it often always goes back. We have to have conversations about what happened to them when they were 5, 6, 7 years old. And what they didn't have at that young age was vocabulary and language to explain what was happening to them. And so we're so proud of this because it has led to dozens of positive disclosures of abuse leading to early intervention. We had a teacher tell us that she was actually pretty apprehensive about facilitating this in her classroom because it's just uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about. But in her classroom, she actually had 2 separate young people come forward, and this was first grade, so 6, 7 years old, come forward saying that what was discussed was happening to them. And they were able to connect them with the Child Advocacy Center. They were able to get interviews done and get services in place. And now she's one of our biggest advocates for the importance of this being taught because she was able to see a direct correlation to interrupting and changing a child's life. So you can see on there the book, Ella the Golden Tool Goes to the Park. You can actually get that book on Amazon. It was written specifically to introduce the curriculum to kindergarten through third graders. And so it's a great tool for parents, grandparents, or I read this to my grandson already, who's 18 months old. And what Ella does is Ella is a cute cuddly little dog, and explains how she doesn't like her soul to be touched. And so it just starts to give language and vocabulary about people violating what is a boundary. And so I highly encourage you guys to go check that out if you have littles in your life. And then our middle school curriculum is based off of Senate Bill 279 that requires the education of human trafficking in middle school, 7th and 8th grade to be specific. And so what we found is that, again, this is supposed to be done through health classes. And so you usually have coaches or people that don't feel comfortable teaching about it. And so we actually had a school system approach us saying, can you create something for us? And so we had a professional production team get with us, and we wrote scripts and we produced content. And these are like little mini movies that they watch in each grade level, and they are scaffolding learning. So they build one year upon the other. And we've just seen disclosures. We're seeing children recognize, even if it's not for themselves, like, wait, this is what's going on with my friends, and I didn't have the vocabulary to explain it. Because what we see with our young people, especially in middle school a lot, is so much of that grooming and recruitment happens online. And so this curriculum really focuses on internet safety also, and understanding what to do or how to identify potentially you are being groomed. So what I want to talk about next is just what vulnerability looks like. Vulnerability, the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed. Let me just read that one more time. Vulnerability is the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. And when we talk about our young girls who have been victims of sex trafficking, this is what is so vital that we begin to truly understand and know how to recognize. At present age, we really pay attention to what's called adverse childhood experience. If you've never heard of this before, ACEs, what we call them, are associated social detriments of health. So it's things that happen that create toxic stress, extended or prolonged stress. Those things can negatively affect the child's brain development, in addition to their immune system, their stress response systems. And so for us as adults, we have to understand that these factors aren't just something that they get over. You know, I had a child one time tell me, somebody told her how strong she was and she was so resilient, and she just started to weep. And I actually hate when people tell me that. She said, I never got a choice, it was survival. And so sometimes what we associate, yes, with strength and resilience, actually is just a picture of someone's most horrific things that have happened in their life, and they had no control or choice over it. So I want to introduce you to Mary. Mary is a young child, recently connected to present age, and she came to us with a tremendous amount of ACEs. And so I want to give you an example at what those ACEs are like. These are the 10 factors that we measure with the children that we work with. We're looking to see if they have a history prior to the trafficking of physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical or emotional neglect, if they've been separated from one or both biological parents. That could be because of many factors. If they have a family member that's been incarcerated or is in the prison system, if they've experienced domestic violence, if they have mental illness, and or if someone in the household had an addiction while they were living here. So these are those 10 ACEs that really help us get to understand what's going on in a child's life. So back to Mary. Mary came to us and she is 6 years old. So I want you just to pause for a minute and think about this. That's kindergarten. For some haven't even started kindergarten. But this is when you're learning and you're in such critical years of development and so many things are happening in their brain. But what we learned is by the time Mary got to present age, she'd already experienced sexual abuse and emotional abuse. She'd already experienced physical and emotional neglect. She was separated from her parent and now someone else had guardianship over her. Her biological father was in jail. She had witnessed domestic violence, and her mom was addicted to. So at 6 years old, Mary already has 8 adverse childhood experiences. And what we begin to that's how she came to us because there was concerns that she was over sexualized and she was saying and doing things that for 6 years old didn't make sense. And as we began to serve her and she got connected to a counselor and our team started working with her, we realized that there was also some familial trafficking that happened in her short 6 years of life. And so for us, what we have to do to start with Mary is recognize that we can immediately, quote unquote, which we hate that word, out of situations of trafficking. But the reality of it is that we cannot undo the vulnerabilities that created that um, that ability to be targeted and grouped in the first place. And so that's what we have to start to do when it comes to programming. Is we have to unwind all the way back to the beginning and say, how do we repair some of those vulnerabilities and begin to teach and begin to give new language, new skills, so that they can start to see the world through a different set of lens. I'll be glad to tell you that Mary is doing amazing. She is loving being involved in her counseling. We've got her and Legal Guardian to a safe place, and she's thriving in school, and she just got the science award in first grade. And so she's doing great, but it's a long, long journey. I just spoke with her this week and I said, we were talking about sleeping, and she said, I didn't sleep good last night. Honey, do you have nightmares? Yeah, all the time, right? Those things, when we give them language, are so normal that sometimes they don't even realize that there's another life outside of what is normal to them. And that's one of the beautiful things that Present Age gets to come alongside and provide and give access to these children and their families that we serve. It's important to note when we specifically think about those pieces that I explained, its youth with human trafficking abuse reports had higher ACE scores and had 6 cases linked to child maltreatment were more prevalent in this group that were studied when it comes to those that have also been trafficked. Sexual abuse was the strongest predictor of human trafficking, which to my point, which is why we created a curriculum to specifically address that much, much younger in age. And the odds of human trafficking were 2.52 times greater for girls who experienced sexual abuse. And there was an 8.2 times greater risk for boys who had a history of sexual abuse. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about our young boys. It's hot. There's such a stigma, not only around sexual abuse as a young boy, but also reporting. It's so taboo that we're still have significantly lower numbers of reports of that. As I mentioned, right now in the Charlotte metro region, we had 94% of our victims identified in 2025 were females. And so we still see tremendous amount of disparity among reporting rates with our young boys. So one of the beautiful things that Present Age has been able to launch in 2025, it's called Restoration Market. It's such a fun thing for us to engage in the community with. It is a retail boutique thrift store, but one of the things that we love to do is also take our clients here, and they get a store credit, and they get to shop for free. They get to reclaim some dignity in their choice, but it also provides an opportunity for us to engage with the community on a topic that can be really difficult, whether that be through volunteering and serving or donating. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, 4 months ago at this point, we had a young lady go and shop there, and they go shopping when the stores during hours for the store, so they're not necessarily interacting with the public. So she was gathering things and she was going, we were taking her to the dressing room for her to try things on, and she got so excited. She said, I feel like I am in the Princess Protection Program. And then she went on to say, I've never been somewhere this nice. And so even little things like that, Present Age gets the ability to give them back choice and dignity. And it's so fun for us to be able to see that play out because so much has been taken from them and so often choice has been taken from them that we truly want to have the opportunity to be able to restore some of that. So I wanted to give you guys contact information where you can reach us. So again, we are based out of the Charlotte metro region, but again, as I shared at the very beginning, our impact and reach goes beyond that. That's just where our physical offices are located. And we do have opportunities to volunteer, and that could look a couple of different ways. So we have volunteer opportunities in our education and training program, as well as working directly with our identified survivors. As you can imagine, there's training that's required for that. And so if you go to our website and you go to get involved under volunteer, the first thing that you can do is see the different pathways that you can volunteer and engage with, and then what training is required. That's something that you would be interested in if you are in and around this area. We also take teams trips over to our Kenya office to do on the ground programming there outside of Nairobi, Kenya, if that's something that you want to go to. And then if you love to go thrifting and you love a good deal, then we would love to invite you to visit the Restoration Market at our physical store. Obviously, we love if anybody wants to support the work that we're doing and give to the work that we're doing. As you can imagine, it's complex and it requires quite a bit when we're working with our young girls as well as the school systems. And we would love that. And finally, if you just want to connect, whether that is to connect us to a resource or to another group. One of the sayings that I say all the time, especially to our task force members when I'm leading that group, is that when the water rises, all ships rise. We truly believe in collaboration and working together and the unity of this work. I had a DA tell me one time that traffickers oftentimes work better together than us as service providers. And and that just always stuck with me when I was just beginning this work. And I made a decision in that moment, like not on our watch. And so we want to be connected to those doing this work and how can we spur one another on because there's just so much to be done. And so we would love to connect with you if that's something that you are interested in. But yes, Present Age Ministries is who we are, and our commitment is to rebuild trust, restore hope, and redefine love one life at a time. And so I know that when we originally had planned this, we discussed having opportunities for if there was any questions. I don't know if that's possible now because of all the technology stuff, but I am going to stop there for a minute. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can come back and see you guys. And then if we don't think questions are possible, then I can continue talking a little bit more about things here in our region. So I'll just stop for a minute, pause for a minute, and turn it over to you guys and give me some instructions.
Ask it here. They have to talk into the Zoom call. Did anybody have a question for her? Why don't you go ahead and just talk for a few more minutes?
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. So one of the things I'd love to talk to you guys a little bit about the data and the trends that we're seeing here in the Charlotte metro region. If you are interested, we put out an annual data report about what we're seeing with our minors. And one of the things that we saw last year, as I mentioned, is 24% of them were females. The average age that we see when it comes to the victimization of our minors is it goes between 14 and 15 years old. And the reason that number is so important, if we go back to what I started this presentation with about commercial sex and the age of consent, in North Carolina, the age of consent to engage in sex is 16 years old. So if our average age of victim identification for trafficking victims is 14 or 15, what does that tell you? They can't even consent to engage with sex with someone that they're choosing and consent, or let alone commercial sex. And so it's really important that we've had to spend a lot of time training law enforcement and first responders to view this differently, because when a child runs away and they're engaged in what a lot of times is called survival sex and all of those things, we still fight the stigma that that's choice and no crime has been committed. But the way that our law and our legislation is written, that could be more farther than the truth. And when we think about our 14 and 15-year-old, I just want you to remind yourself what it was like to be 14. What were you thinking about? What were you worried about? What were you concerned about? And yet we have some of our children that are out there, like truly trying to figure out how to survive not only what's being demanded of them by their trafficker, which is sometimes serving 6, 8, 10 men a day, and just think about the reality to that, both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But then there is the reality of like, I have to now go home and try to turn that off. And so we just are seeing a tremendous impact on the development of our children because of that, as well as just long-term effects that have to be spent months, if not years, overcoming. One of the things that we have found research shows us, both when it comes to prevention and the necessity of prevention, is that for every dollar that we spend on prevention, we actually save a community $34. And the reason that is that when someone goes through all of this horrific trauma, the impact on the outside of that is there's medical concerns, there's mental health concerns, there can be sometimes impact socially speaking, and so that impact costs the community way more than if we would invest on the front end. Particular night. And this we were talking about what does healthy relationships look like. And they were they were all back and forth saying, "They've gotta be rude, and they've gotta be honest, and they've gotta be, kind." They all know appear what it's supposed to look entertaining conversation. And they were all back and forth saying, "They've gotta be rude, and they've gotta be honest, and they've gotta be, kind." They all know up here what it's supposed to look like. And so after we made a giant list on, on a big whiteboard, then we had them sit down. They also all were in active relationships, and they evaluate and they inventory, is that person that you're in a relationship with those things that you just identified? And the most beautiful things that took place because they're making their list and they're realizing um, that it's not like this person isn't honest to me. This person has other girlfriends, and this person, threatens to hit me if I get out of right. So even though that may not be a trafficking situation, there's still these elements of violence in this particular life in that relationship she was in. And what happened next was beautiful because one of the other girls started to speak life over her. She was like, "Don't you know that you're worth more than that? You deserve better." And I know it's hard because I'm realizing that the person I'm in a relationship with isn't these things either. But that's what this is about. We have to start believing that we're worth more. And we start to encourage each other because sometimes it's so easy to see someone else's worth and value before you can see yours. And that's what we try to cultivate at present age for these girls is an opportunity to see themselves differently than how they see themselves when they come to us. And that was a beautiful example of what that redefining love looks like. And so at this time, I am going to pause again because we're getting ready. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left, and just see if there's anybody else that has any questions before we wrap up for today. Fantastic question. I would say in my experience, 90 to 100% happens online. And what I mean by that is that it may initiate online, it's going to always move offline at some point. But it's so easy for traffickers to groom and recruit through internet, social media apps, and gaming that's where our kiddos are. So that's where traffickers go. So in our experience, we see almost all that connects and intersects with internet at some point in during that grooming phase. Yeah. Okay. So what we don't see is one specific thing. So we have seen it happen through Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, all of any and they Discord that oftentimes move offline to another app where that person who oftentimes is saying, "Hey, I'd love to get to know you more," they're romancing our kiddos, boy, male or female, and hey, let's go over here where we're going to have more privacy. So anytime there's that, like, hey, we need secrecy, it's a red flag. But we also, in my work, I work a lot with the FBI and Homeland Security and stuff, and I was doing a briefing with them about 764, which is it's not a trafficking related gang, if you will, but highly highly organized and manipulative, a lot like traffickers are, and use a lot of the same grooming tactics. But that is what we're seeing is that they're actually doing a lot of recruiting on gaming systems, things like Roblox, things like Grand Theft Auto. I mean, anything that there is chatting capabilities, and they can interact with one another. Because here's what's happening: whether on social media apps or gaming, they're creating a bond that feels real to that child, even though it's a false sense of security because it's a stranger. You have no idea who that person is. They can tell you they're anybody and everybody, and you don't know any difference. And so once that has been established, whether it's a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, then when they're like, hey, will you send me a picture? It doesn't feel strange because I know this person. I talk to them all the time. I talk to them every week when we play games. And quickly that usually moves into blackmail because now they have a picture, now they have information about them. And that is where we oftentimes see the switch to trying to exploit. Like, if you don't do these things now that I'm asking you to do, I have this picture of you. I have, I turned on your camera and it was reflecting you were changing your clothes. It could be something, it could be a lot of different things, but now that child feels trapped. And so they oftentimes will comply with the request that turns and crosses a line of exploitation or trafficking. Yay. I love that. It makes me so happy. Yes. Mhm. Yeah. Here, it depends. And so that's what gets tricky because we see that all the time, all the time. And what gets tricky is that if they're just conversating and there hasn't been a crime yet, even though we know that it's grooming, it's technically not a crime for you to talk to somebody else. But what we often see is when a trafficker is grooming a young person, there is going to be that pressure to maintain contact, which just sounds like what you're describing. Now, I can't say for sure that was trafficking. I mean, obviously, but that gets where it gets super tricky because IP addresses, depending on the platform that they're using on, most of the time don't reside in the United States. So to get subpoenas that and to get companies to comply with that can take weeks or months. So it's not a quick process, especially when there isn't a clear crime that's being committed and it's concerned. And that's why we really encourage parents when we're in the community educating, like, you really need to understand one, just the platforms that are out there for your child to use. And if you choose to give them a device, you've got to spend time, money, and energy into protecting them because it's a different world than when we were out there. I mean, I'm probably older than most of you think I am. And the reality of it is that I know a world pre internet and pre phones. And so our children don't. And so even this younger generation of ones, 10 and under, their whole entire world now has revolved around devices. They do school now online when there's a snow day or when, during COVID. So there's just a difference. There's a gap, almost like a chasm from generation to generation. And we've got to close that as parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles so that we can protect our kids. Well, if that's all the questions, I just want to say thank you all for the time and the opportunity to share with you about the work that's being done at Present Age and here in the Charlotte metro region. And please feel free to reach out and connect with us. Or if you have any questions or follow-up things that you'd like to talk about outside of this, I would love to be a resource and to connect with you. So thank you guys so much for this opportunity. And I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you. Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Is it on? Thank you. Is it on?
Thank you so much.
Keep up the good work. Hello, hello, hello. Is it ready? Oh yeah, good. So you guys, we talked a little bit before about the things that Awaken Bold is poised to do. It requires funding so that we can do the martial arts program. We want to do the situational awareness program. We've got amazing people that are ready to do those programs. But I do want to introduce you to Living Design Technology. And Living Design Technology is it's a technology that creates harmonious environments. And what it is, it's like a frequency. And in the frequency, it neutralizes and harmonizes geopathic stress and dirty electricity. So if you have like your routers and all those blue lights and you feel kind of weird and ucky, well, that's kind of what it can help create a harmonious environment for. So Dr. Brian Lum is here. He actually does that technology with his clients, and he does that for the people's bodies. So I want to bring him up, and then we're going to introduce our joint venture, Living Design, Tika Caldwell.
Thank you. I'm honored, excuse me, I'm honored to be here. This moment in time is so precious. And I want to begin by sharing a little story about myself and ultimately the reason why I'm here before you today. The summer of 2017, I attended a men's retreat with Elder Malidoma Patrice Sommet. Anyone here familiar with Elder Malidoma? Okay. Check out his work. He has 2 books of water, Water in the Spirit and The Healing Wisdom of Africa. He has a really amazing story, and he's brought wisdom to the West that has transformed my life. I went to this men's retreat, and on the outside of my life, everything looked really shiny, bright. I appeared to be at the top of my game. And I wasn't not. I was in a certain way. I've been practicing as a chiropractor for 20 years. I had come into this work called network spinal analysis. It's now network spinal. I was teaching that as one of Donnie Epstein's top teachers. I've been taking care of Tony Robbins at his live events for about 8 years. I'd been on his private jet. I had just received a completion of a 3-year journey to adopt my first son, Maxwell. Everything on the outside seemed like it was amazing and going in the right direction. And yet on the inside, there was something inside of me that felt incredibly broken. Here I was, a healer, and I felt something was incredibly off. And so this opportunity to go to this men's retreat made itself known, and I was like, something inside just said go. So I went. And Malidoma, I had many male role models, and he did something that I'd never seen an elder male do. Little backstory on him: when he was 4 years old, he was taken from his community in Burkina Faso, the Dagra people, some of the best people, in my opinion, who know how to human on this earth properly. We've lost our way there, so read his books. He was taken away by Jesuit priests until he was 18, and he basically broke free and went back, walked back to his land. And they looked at him and they were like, who's this white guy? And he's a very Black African man. They said that because vibrationally he had become enculturated into the white ways, the language, the socialization, the mathematics. He had been sexually abused while he was there. And they said, okay, well, if you are to become one of us, if you are to become Dagra, you must go through initiation. And so he did. And when I showed up, here was this man, and he was sharing that he was broken himself, and he was leading this retreat. He had just lost his wife, and he was questioning everything about what he knew about his connection to spirit, about equanimity, of one's devotion and faith, and how could this happen? The woman that he loved, he had lost. So he was openly sharing this to me, and I was like broken myself in that moment. I'm like, shit, how is this broken man going to lead what appears to be a collection of broken men? And yet this powerful, vulnerable moment led to something that changed the course of my life. He was honest, he was authentic, and he did what he did, which is he brought us through African ritual of the elements. And after a day and a half of preparation, we spent all night. And when it was my turn, I went through the process, and it just seemed like I was doing these things that I was supposed to do. And there was a moment when, seemingly out of nowhere, my knees collapsed and I dropped to the ground, and a sound came out of my voice of rage. I didn't know where it came from, but it was spontaneous, it was real, and I beat my hands on the earth. And then after that, I collapsed and I grieved and was carried through the rest of the initiation. The next morning, I would wake up and I saw a vision of my grandmother's bathroom, and I was shown that I was sexually abused when I was an infant. And in that moment, the realization of 20 years of being in a very brilliant healing modality, and yet I was focusing all my attention on healing others because I couldn't find my own wholeness. And yet this indigenous practice ritual brought me there like that. I became a student of the elements at that moment. I left the organization that I had spent 20 years growing to the top of, and everything that was connected to it dropped away over the course of probably about a month. My whole life seemed to fall apart. And then I walked away from a 20-year relationship marriage while I had pretty much an infant son around the same age as the time period that I was abused. Over the course of the time that's led to today, I started to be able to have conversations with my ancestors. Both my parents passed. I had conversations with my grandmother as to why this happened, and I was shown the agreement that we had before I came into form, and everything started to make sense. It made sense why I became aware of Barbara Marciniak, who channeled the Pleiades. That was back in 1994, and I followed her, and then that led me to David Icke, The Biggest Secret, and I started to deep dive the dark secret that has been on this planet of sex trafficking, of the shadow government, of the Illuminati, of the families that own this place. And it made so much sense to why people would come to me and they would open up in the ways that they did, even though I hadn't yet. So from that birthed what I do now over the course of 8 years, the birth of my first son, Maxwell, and now my 18-month-old son, who actually before, when I was getting ready, went into, we just moved literally 3 days ago. He goes into a box, we're just boxes on boxes, and he pulls out one of Tika's little harmonizers and he hands it to me. He doesn't speak. And I said, yes, I'm going to see Tika. He's never met her. This is how spirit speaks when you are connected in that way. Both my sons are brilliant. And so what unfolded was what I do now. Over the last 8 years, I've become aware of a few things. Here's what I've learned. Earth is a trauma-based learning center. You land and you have an agreement as a soul and you're perfect. There is nothing wrong with your soul. Your soul can never be tainted. It's perfect and it's here to explore and learn and grow. However, admission is the price of landing in a lineage. And our lineage as humanity, as we're all discovering now, and as I've known for a while, has been broken for thousands and thousands of years. Very few on this planet have an unbroken chain of their ancestors to them and even their future ancestors. And so The deal is we sign onto a line, we get into that body, and ideally, we make that line stronger. We connect the dots. And right now, in the age of disclosure and in the age of impending wholeness, we are doomed to become whole, according to what I see. And the elements, according to the indigenous, are our ancestors, they're our teachers, and they're the ingredients of creation: earth, water, fire, mineral, air, nature. When you're born matters. It matters because it's important, and it literally creates how your matter comes together and how your frequency, your soul, lands in your body. Trauma separates your frequency from your physical body. Your body winds tension as a wound. You're wound. In that winding, wounding is your curriculum for why you're here. If you talk to anyone who's gone through the full arc of trauma, especially the greater the trauma, the greater the gift that they're to bring. If you go through an intense trauma like sexual abuse, you will leave your body because you have to. And if you live through the experience, you're here, but you're not completely here. It's like a safe. There's 3 numbers to get into the safe. If you know the 3 numbers, you can get your goodies, but if you can't, good news is your shit's safe. You just can't get in, but neither can anyone else. So most of us are walking around with our code scrambled. So we all have a code based upon when we're born of the elements, and when we go into trauma, our body scrambles that code for protection. And in that scrambling is the keys to your reason for being on this planet, why you're here. We're all in this room because you have a resonance of trauma that somehow approximates what we're talking about here. And we're all each other's medicine. So when I work with the body, it's first to start to allow a person to unwind through their code and create safety in their body. From that, then the soul starts to come in and we start to align. And through that process, we become aware of why the trauma in the first place. And we are the opposite of that. We are keepers of the frequency of the light that is reciprocal and opposite to the darkness that we experienced, that is the trauma. Does this make sense? It's a perfect system. It's a perfect system. It's the only way I can make sense of God. Like, why would it happen? And if you talk to anyone who's survived any level of massive trauma, cancer, sexual abuse, death that happens in an egregious way, they all say the same thing. I am who I am because of that. I am who I am because I went through that process. But you have to be on the wholeness side of the arc. So I'm here in celebration for where we're headed into this impending wholeness. And I'm here to also share the grief of where we've been. Some of you have known this for years. And it's very hard to hold this information and energy. So fortunately, it's liberating now. And the only reason that we are being disclosed at the level that we're being disclosed is because we're whole enough to do this. So I celebrate you for being here. I celebrate you for your impending wholeness. And I want to thank Tika for giving me a moment on stage here with you. I wouldn't be here without her. I've known Tika since 2018. And the work that I do in the human body, she does for the environment. And part of what we are as we become more whole is an ecosystem of wholeness as human beings. Our individual wholeness, that's the best thing that we can do, is support your own wholeness and you will support the wholeness of others. Tika has created a brilliant technology that makes it such that all of this deleterious noise, all of this toxicity that we live in, just turn on your phone, see how many Wi-Fi, how many Bluetooth, all that stuff, instead of trying to get rid of it or turn it off, her technology turns it into the magic of nature. Her technology takes dissonance and turns it into resonance. And so if you feel the vibe of this place as like, wow, this feels really cool here, it's a great place, but she's also given it some turbo. So I want to say thank you very much for having me. You can find us. Thank you. You can find us at Genius Frequency. You just add a .com, and that's where we are on the web. We're on Instagram. And I'm going to pass it off to Tika here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you, Brian. I really appreciate you sharing your truth. It's uplifting to collaborate with everybody, and I really want to give a shout out to Kathy. Her presentation was so moving, and every part of what she said in many ways just made me want to jump out of my chair, because not only was she talking about the trauma that Brian did a great recap of, but she was also talking about her healing process. And not only did I begin doing the environmental work, but I also simultaneously began holographic integration and personal transformation work for over 20 years while I was developing the environmental work, because of my own personal life experience in my family that was traumatic. And I don't need to go into my story. I'm going into the story of a solution, but I really do understand the nature of why we're here. My mother had a caregiver that was trafficked, and she's still part of my life. And I've been in, when I had training at brain state training, there were 7 people there who were in traffic situations or sexual ritual abuse situations. But the reason why Living Design was created was because I had a deep passion for nature, I had a deep passion for beauty, and I had a deep passion for harmony. You know, I was fortunate that I was well loved in some aspects of my life, and then I experienced the very opposite of that. And because of my love of nature, and you know, I'm old enough to have been here too before the internet, and was very worried about the water, the bees and the trees, and the collapse of our entire environment, and the proliferation of nuclear warfare and radiation, that I went into environmental studies and began writing a degree from geology in 1977 at Western State College. And then I went to Alfred University, and they had one of the first environmental study programs there, but I also had a kind of vicarious degree in art because my husband at the time was there for the art school. And that's important because art and science brought me to the understanding of clay, and clay has a memory. And a lot of the tools and the beginning of the foundation of the tools that we use, that I've created a system with, to place in environments, to place in water, to place in dirt, to place next to Wi-Fi routers, circuit breaker panels, LED lighting, solar grids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a system of tools that, by the grace of God, it's only a miracle that, because of my passion for nature and beauty and environmental harmony, that when I met my late husband, Richard, who passed a month after Helene, he was a bioenergetic architect. He was also a traditional architect. But Richard introduced me to an art and science called biogeometry. Bio, life, geometry, shape. The shapes in nature which create life force. Many of you can look at how a pine cone spins. You can maybe see how a sunflower, the seeds spin. You can see how the spin of the trees on a branch. The harmonic proportion, or the golden ratio, that nature has been created with
is for a reason. It is for a reason to take the spirit of life, the spirit of God, the spirit of life force to create a perfected distribution of electromagnetic energy charge. And we are living in buildings with 90-degree angles. All of our lines are going straight. And the way that the wires are wrapped that give us the ability to send a message and to generate information as frequency that can arrive in the way that you can hear my voice now can be changed, because energy is the ability to do work, but energy is also the ability to create an effect. And a lot of the technology that we are using in our world today connects us. However, it also creates an effect, and I will show you some slides, that it does deplete life force, and it interrupts our ability to connect with our higher self. It interrupts our whole brain functioning. It interrupts our ability to ground, and it interrupts our ability to heal and to become whole. And so when we want to connect with the divine, when we want to connect with our higher self, when we want to have whole brain functioning and language of peace, when we have all this other quantum noise that is blessing us in many ways, we can transform it to not only do what we enjoy, but we can transform it to be love, to be love. And I used to not want to be that bold about saying that. Now I don't care. It's the truth. So we'll take a quick run through this slideshow. It's a little bit of a science lesson. I'll try to make it simple. But as we know, all life exists within a unified energy field. And Lynn McTaggart was a skeptic, and she wrote a book called The Field. And at the end of the day, after all of her research, she said, at our most elemental, we are not a chemical reaction, but we are an electromagnetic energy charge. What leaves when we drop our body and we are pronounced dead? That is life force, it is spirit, and it is an electromagnetic energy charge. Like when you have a heart attack, some people will get shock treatment, it will bring you back. Next. Okay, living design technology, it's a system. The living design technology is not the tool. It's not the thing. It's not the substrate. It is the frequency spectrum that is all of the 144 magnetic frequencies common to living systems that support life. And what is unique about living design technology is we are working at the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, astral, causal, and divine level to create coherent multidimensional energy. And it's a 0-point resonance technology designed to harmonize the bioenergetic field to support the entire web of life. Because if we don't have water, bees, and trees, what are the humans going to do? We need to not only support the humans, but we need to support the entire ecosystem. And so the bioenergetic field is the energy structure which all living systems build on to form matter. Spirit came before matter. Without the integrity of a natural, balanced, and harmonized bioenergetic field, there is a lack of coherence and a lack of the natural distribution of electromagnetic energy charge. And so this is the full spectrum of coherent light. You can see we have green, blue, indigo, violet, but we also, and we have the red, orange, and yellow, but we also have invisible frequencies, and this is where a lot of our technology is operating, especially the negative green. Now, negative green could be called infragreen, because like we have infrared, black, negative green, white, and ultraviolet. And each one of those 12 bands has 12 sub-bands. And if you're a rock climber, and if you have a chain, one broken chain can be the death of you. And in our environment, we have so much interference that even in beautiful environments, we have a lot of the broken chain of the coherence of the natural divine light, which is life force. And this woman, Dr. Valerie Hunt, she was one of the early ones to prove that the human energy field, or the aura, has the healthy human field has a signature where all these healthy frequencies are present, and an unhealthy field, or one that is about to become unhealthy, has a different look. And she was able to detect this and predict disease long before it manifested in the physical, because she was looking at the bioenergetic field. Next. So the electromagnetic field, which is everything, it's not just your Wi-Fi router, your cell phone, it's everything. Everything is energy, everything is frequency, and everything is vibration. There is no separation. And so when we have a stabilized, coherent, full spectrum life force energy field that we are living within, we can remain healthy even when we're exposed to incoherent energy. And this is important because why? Through the law of resonance, the stronger resonance will bring the weaker resonance into resonance with it. Like the human energy field is like a bicycle. All of the technology that we are surrounded by is like a Mack truck. We go into resonance with the technology that we are in proximity to. And so that just happens automatically, but we don't know that. And it begins to, like when we go do healing retreats and some shamans who want to work, whether it's the jungle or the forest or whatever. Why? Because you're being taken away from all of this disturbance so that you can actually begin to hear your own heartbeat and hear your own self and your wisdom, okay? And this quickly, or, two water molecules, one is showing a coherent molecule and one is not. And we are blood. Our blood is water. This is also happening within the trees, the sap of the trees. So we have coherent and incoherent, okay? And also the thing about water is that not all water is living water. Water in plastic bottles, water that is sat around, water that has gone in straight pipes. Water has life force. And water has memory. Water has memory just like clay. And water can be chemically clean, but it does not mean that it is vital. And you can clean that water chemically, but it can still be dead. And so in 2000, my late husband, Richard, introduced me to Dr. Ibrahim Karim, and he brought forth the art and science of biogeometry. And Ibrahim had inherited this body of work from Champmarey de Balaizé in France prior to World War II. And they had a science called microvibrational radiesthesia, the detection and correction of microvibrations. One of the two scientists, Champmarey de Balaizé, I don't remember one, died in the process. And it's a long story, but fundamentally, it was about measuring the waves of the colors of light with the aid of a pendulum and a ruler. And oddly, the Jesuits had preserved this knowledge. Next. So Back to the Future for Mankind is, basically what we're talking about. How are we restoring natural divine order here? Using subtle energy to create harmony in the environment and bridging the gap between ancient wisdom, science, spirituality, and modern technology. And at the end of the day, when we bring back this full spectrum magnetic frequency with no broken chains, what is that? That is a power spot in nature where healing and miracles have occurred. It's an apparition site of Mother Mary. It's where magic can happen in the highest way. And then paramagnetism is another subtle energy quality that we learned about, and I work with a soil scientist and about revitalizing the soil. And this is something that was also, in every apparition site of Mother Mary was highly paramagnetic. Next. So here we have so many things in our environment. We have the GMOs, we have the glyphosate, the fertilizers, the heavy metals, on and on and on and on and on. I cried my way through environmental studies, which is why when I learned and discovered this art and science of biogeometry and microvibrational radiesthesia, I finally began to find some answers. But I was just hysterical. like all the time. And my father said, daughter, you can't go on like this. So I quickly got a degree in bilingual multicultural elementary education and started recycling programs and art programs for kids because I thought if I could save the kids, I could help save the planet. So here we go. And with all of these environmental toxins, many layers are needed. But if we do not have that full spectrum of life force, infiltration and rehabilitation, we can't make the difference. So next. And we have the problem that the power lines deplete vitality, reduce immunity, reduce coherence, and it changes the water molecule as well. And it creates geopathic stress. And then we have this thing, geopathic stress. Basically, it's just the earth energy lines go into resonance with all the other stuff, and it becomes unhealthy. And you can see that cancer growth on the tree. And again, all the underground power lines and the disturbances, it gets in the water and then it starts to program the water. Water's a programmable crystal. So what we do has a ripple effect in many, many ways. But when we can start to harmonize all these infrastructures, we can make grids of golden light. Next. It also causes dehydration. And so what are we doing? What we can do, we take this natural golden sunlight of nature, and then we have all this man-made incoherent electromagnetic energy fields, which is running our world. But how do we make what's running our world have the same vibration, frequency, and quality as the natural light? The light that comes from our heart and the healthy light that comes from source. That's why I'm here and what I love and what we're talking about. And many of you also know, about plenty of EMF products. Well, everything's EMF, everything's electromagnetic frequency. Some, reduce, avoid, block, filter, absorb. But living design transforms. It doesn't block. It works complementary to all of those other things. But what we do is we bring that healthy frequency spectrum of a healthy heartbeat, of a power spot in nature, and we put it in proximity to all of the stuff that's making the quantum noise, and we up-level it. And we have ways to discover the difference that we make with gas discharge visualization. And we worked with Dr. Gaetan Chevalier at SciTech Lab, and that's where we got some of our early science. Zyto machines can also detect the energy fields and quality. The tri-field meter will not pick up the difference between living design before and after, because the tri-field meter is only picking up the amount of electricity. It's not picking up the quality of the electricity or the energy. So we have quality and quantity. So we're a subtle energy technology, just like humans. And so we really need to use scientific microvibrational radiesthesia or kinesiology or dowsing or Kirlian photography or GDV cameras to show, or growth in plants to show the positive effects. So to recap, we have traditional science teaches us about biology, chemistry, and physics, but we are here to talk about the bioenergetic science that has not been taught, which was really removed after World War II from our understanding. So living design technology creates a coherent, stabilized, full spectrum frequency foundation with the bioenergetic field of the earth, air, and water. And it restores this life force foundation that is natural. And when that is there, the earth can remediate problems more easily. Of course, not to keep us from doing everything that we can do to help, like filtration and all types of other things. So next. And in humans, we have seen better sleep, increased ability to focus, improved emotional and physical flexibility, physical grounding and balance. And we do have an exercise that I'll show with somebody. Is Zach in the room? Come on up. So we're just going to do a little balance test here. And he could be like super grounded and I might not be able to budge him. We never know what's going to happen with everybody, but we're just going to do a little test. This is a commercial tile infused with the Living Design multidimensional 144 frequency spectrum. Okay, and it's stabilized. So we're going to just see if this has an effect. Who wants? I don't know if I can hold the microphone. Come on, here. Okay. Okay, so first, if you put your feet together, and I'm just going to put my fist in your hand, stand straight, and we're just going to try to find your natural balance point. Okay, so you resist me, and I'm just going to try your natural balance point. Okay, budge a little bit. Put this in your hand, put your feet together, stand straight. Let me find your natural balance point. Oops.
Thought that was a magnet.
Okay, no, but there's magnetic frequencies in there. And so what it does is it enhances like your aura, your energy field recognizes that information and starts to fill in the gaps. Do you have your cell phone on you?
Don't.
Okay.
It's over there. I can grab it.
Okay, here's a non-harmonized cell phone. Okay, so put that in your hand. Okay, take them. Put your feet together, because that's the baseline. All humans, you know, the limit is when their feet touch. Okay, so we're just going to try to find his natural balance point with this cell phone. Okay. We have stickers you put on your cell phone, but we'll use the ceramic. Hold that glass on the back with your cell phone. Put your feet together. Stand up straight. Grip my hand. And it's just making the energy. Thank you. Keep the tile. Just stick that in your pocket.
Keep the tile. Thank you.
Okay. Basically, what we are doing is we're surrounded by all this stuff. So when we infuse it with what we naturally are and what's naturally healthy, it makes us stronger. Okay, let's see what the next slide is. We'll wrap it up. We all know we have the growth of electricity. Okay, so Living Design is transforming the way people work with one another. Why? Because it helps us connect with our higher self. It helps us feel more grounded. It helps us be a little more free to think our own thoughts and to be present. And by choosing to create or co-create in harmony with nature, we increase coherence multidimensionally. To me, that's the most important thing. Because we can make this as scientific as we want, but ultimately, to me, this is a spiritual passion. And I will say this, that, you know, I am committed to working with organizations and businesses. Living Design is a B Corporation, and we've spent a lot of time. After Katrina, we did a Harmonizing New Orleans program. After the BP oil spill, we did a Harmonizing the Gulf program. After Fukushima, we did a Harmonizing World Water program. After fires twice in Asheville, we did Harmonizing Asheville program. The heartbeat of Living Design has been community service and large environmental projects where we were walking on water and we were given money from out of nowhere to go put stuff in the ecosystems, do now and ask for forgiveness later. Guerrilla harmony is what I call it. And that's why we're here and that's what we're doing. And I will say that Horseshoe Farm Spa is harmonized And Jordan, the son's, the owner, the son, Jordan helps run this. He wrote a testimonial, which I may read, but let me just run you through a few quick slides. This was plants on the right, before and after. Organic soil, the ones on the right had the ceramic harmonizers in the box. This was Nick, my son, he's standing over there. He forgot to put, this wasn't even a planned experiment. It was just a Nick thing. He did one and he forgot the other one, and then we had a good experiment. Same starts, same soil, everything. Next, this was my garden. And we also have clay powder, and we had biochar, azomite, organic, everything. But I didn't tell Richard, I didn't tell my team, I didn't tell anybody. I fed some of the kale, the clay powder, and some not. And look at the difference in the growth. Then we decided we were going to grow the sprouts on the Wi-Fi router. Our soil scientist told us, try that. And so we had a harmonizer on the Wi-Fi router with and without, and you can see the difference in the coherence and the vitality of the sprouts. It was a low light laundry room, so they were tall and lanky. Is there another slide, Kayla? Yep, see? Big difference, the ones on the Wi-Fi router without the living design and the one on the right with. Next. And then we had Kathy, our friend, her friend Nora had a daughter who'd been vaccine injured. It was before COVID. And Nora was having some serious medical issues with her white and red blood cell count. And there was a period of time where she wasn't doing any other intervention, but she was taking the clay powder. And she had a significant improvement in her blood before she started additional therapies to help her. We don't make any medical claims. This was the mama saying it. Next. And so in February, we went to Montgomery, Alabama. We had a big job, and it was a place that had a well, and we had before and after chemical testing of the well. And that was it. Show me the bottom line. The bottom line was before the living design technology, it had all of the lists on the left present where you see the check. After we harmonized the well, the chemical result, I didn't ask for this, she did this. She had the chemical test before we came. And she said, Tika, I think if you harmonize the well, I won't need to get this filter. I said, Elmore, I cannot make that claim. And she said, well, you watch. Well, before and after that was her chemical test. And is there anything else? What? Well, actually, that's a great question. We had our copper rods and we put them in the ground. We put our magnets and our different things all around. So it was heavily treated, but we did the water pump and the ground around the well, basically. Yes. Yeah, we didn't put it in the well. We did the pump and the well house, and then we put the copper rods and the other tools all on the ground around the pump. And then here's Dr. Gaetan Chevalier at SciTech Lab. Gaetan is now part of the Make America Healthy Again team. And he's been working with us since 2016. And he was the first scientist to really back the work that we do. He still is working with us and recommends our tools. And he has a lot of great credentials. Next. So his testimony was several years ago, we tested your product for EMF protection. 5 years. They tested our tools without telling us. Because when we went in 2016 and we had our first test, one of the results was so much that they legally would not let us share it. He said, I would get in trouble. And he said, Tika, I can keep you out of trouble, but if you get into trouble, I can't help you. You cannot make claims, and you can only share the information in the way that he's approved that we do. So 5 years after we met him, he gave us a call right around Earth Day and our anniversary, and this is what they showed us. We found that It was not only effective at protecting a person's energy, but it was able to restore a person's energy to a state at least as good as the energy state of the person before the exposures to the EMF. Having repeated this process of exposing people to EMFs and seeing how your product was able to restore their energy every time convinced us of its effectiveness. This is even more significant in that we have tested many products purporting to protect against EMFs, but never found one until we tested yours. We want to congratulate you on offering a product that works, a rarity in this type of products for EMF. And I will say that we've only been word of mouth. We really don't do the internet. We don't do social media. It's been a magnetic way of being. And I thank Hara for connecting me with Awaken Bold, because these children need the support, in my opinion. All children and all humans do. But in the recovery of the trauma that we're talking about, our goal to energy balance safe houses is tremendous. And it's with a collective support and a passion and a vision, and with the assistance of divine intervention, that we're going to do this. So thank you very much.
So we've listened today to a lot of people speak, and we have more. We have 107 here, so everybody's ready for you. I would say that you listen to Kathy O'Brien. She told you that story about what happened to her. Like, is that the most amazing? And then you have somebody like Tika. She's got this technology. You saw what happened with Zach. His body became stronger. He had a force field that kind of brought it together. So can you imagine these kids that get rescued, that go through these terrible, terrible situations? So we were in Yuba City together, California, at the Church of Glad Tidings, and they were buying a prison for whatever, for safe housing. So you have a roof over a kid's head, but could you imagine the energy inside that prison? Come on, man. We said, hey, we're going to go in there and we're going to help harmonize it, because can you imagine the benefit to a child's nervous system that's been through all of that? And so anyway, so we're so delighted to have this venture. Our goal is to get into every safe house that there is and harmonize it. Help us. Thank you.
You want one to come back? Okay. So thank you, Tika. And I think we're going to have Juan come up next. He's just arrived, and I know a lot of people are looking forward to seeing him. So come on up.
Thank you. Beautiful. And I enjoyed what you had to say, Tika. And I have probably some different perspectives, but I'd love to talk with you later, because you know, I spent a lot of years on some of this what people thought was wild science. When I was a little kid, some of you guys might remember that there would be books that you could get, you know, strange and unusual and whatever. And by the way, I would go put my picture up, please. But they'd have wild and unusual books with whatever it was that, you know, strange science, strange things out there. I remember reading one where a guy was spending time in early parts of photography, turn of the last century, just photographing people after they died, people that were very, very, very sick. And he would get permission to show up and take images of them with this early photography. And then, as often as not, he would get what appeared to be their ghost or their soul or their spirit. But he did something else that I thought was so unusual. He also got extremely sensitive weight equipment and was weighing the body And he actually came up with numbers that were very consistent as people passed. And there would be a certain period of time, but where you could see when this ghosting effect happened, at the same time, the body would change weight. So there was a weight to the soul. Can you imagine that? Can you think about that? The reason that I find it so interesting, I think, and it's a conversation, but you might be seeing an effect in this field effect that actually has a different core than most people imagine. And I've actually taught courses on this, and it's kind of interesting stuff. The classes that you have to be invited to that you can't sign up for unless you're invited. And one thing I'll just add, just before I go on to other stuff, we had a problem. Some of you might have seen that I did a little quick blurb the other day on the space shuttle and tied it to what's going on in the country and Tina. I just put it out yesterday. If you haven't read it, it might take a second and read it. And one of the things that we saw related to our rocket launches was they always like to do it in the calm of the morning or pre-dawn period a lot of times because the winds are less. And so, and also you wanted to sell this, right? You seen the movies where they're selling space and, you know, everything else, get people, taxpayers to spend money, right? So in this particular situation, we noticed something that was unique. We hadn't had quite the same problem with the Apollo stuff, but when we got to the shuttle, we had a problem. And the problem was that they kept having failures of sensors. And they'd be all ready to launch. Everything's good to go. They've loaded the fuel. Everything's ready. We're ready to launch right now. You see the big countdown clock and it's coming down. And all of a sudden, in the last moments as they get to launch, they'd have a sensor failure. Key sensor failures in various parts of the fuel tanks. And those sensor failures were a go, no-go situation. They couldn't go. They'd have to stop. When you looked at the data, it was almost always in certain alignments with the moon, the sun, the pre-dawn. And the reason is because the guys running NASA are actually the most occult group on the planet because they want to do their stuff for their God, what they believe people are watching them in honor of certain mystical things, planetary alignments, solar alignments, moon and other planet, you know, other solar systems, galaxies, whatever. So with that, or star systems, I should say. So with that in mind, when they were doing these launches at specific times, it just so happened that the physics, real physics, were interfering with the sensors because of what they were doing. The rocket would test just fine all the days up to it, all night, the night before. They'd load it with fuel. And now you've got the liquid hydrogen, the oxygen, you've got the solid rocket boosters. And you have to picture one other thing about these launches. They're done on huge concrete pads. That whole area is just one huge pile of concrete and rock underneath. Very well grounded, by the way. But more important, what's in there is one other thing that most people don't think about. Lime. Okay. What's the Great Pyramid made of? Limestone. So all of a sudden, it makes sense. It's solid, it's big. You hold a spaceship down when it's launching. It's got to light for a couple of seconds before you release it and let it go. Your physics change around the launch pad as the sun comes up. We're living on a very thin crust of this hard earth. It's like the thickness of an onion skin to, you know, one layer of an onion skin to the whole onion. And so, and then you attach this big lime nodule onto it and the physics change, but it's not, you see the effect in electromagnetic, but that's not the cause. The electromagnetic is a field effect related to the subatomic physics. And so that's where we could have a very fun, interesting conversation. And when you look at that area of physics, just like you mentioned the pendulum, and if you remind me of that, that's the area. One of the ways that we measure, there was a scientist in Russia, and he ran afoul of yes, and he did his work in a basement while he's hiding out. And he noticed an effect. And I started talking about this 45 years ago, so I've been on this for quite a while. He noticed this effect, actually 50, where he was measuring certain things using a pendulum, and in a couple of his tests, the pendulum started doing things that physics wouldn't allow for. It made no sense. It went out of sequence and then fell back in. And he's trying to figure this out. For years, he couldn't figure out why his tests occasionally were wrong. And it wasn't till somebody suggested to him and he looked and he saw that these were eclipses that occurred during those moments. And the physics altered, changed, was affected. And the physics technically didn't change. What happened was he was seeing a physical effect based on other physics, subatomic physics, that was affecting the pendulum swing. So once you understand subatomic physics, goes by 100 different names. You got all these scientists are looking at similar effects, and it's the semantics that give it different terms, but it's the same underlying physics. So that's where the semantics usually gets in the way of most of the scientists. And these are very real effects. Think about this. A lot of times people ascribe a spiritual thing to something that's actually real physics. It's real. Even the soul coming out of a body, is there real physics potentially attached to that? Even when we go to the DNA, which the DNA is, that's another conversation I'd love to have. It's actually like a guitar string. And all of the stages, it's because of crystalline resonance related to the subatomic physics. So there is an electromagnetic effect that you're observing, but the subatomic physics is what's actually causing this, that it's responding to it. Even the shapes in, like the sunflower you mentioned, what you're really seeing is imagine that a seed growing and expressing is having an effect on it from this subatomic physics. And what happens is, as the seed is growing, it's actually under a bit of torsion. It's almost like a wind, okay? So it kind of has to lean with that wind like a tree or grass blade bending. And so its growth is related to that subatomic physics. We've mapped this lots of times. There's one of the guys that did something, he put a turning disc. Doesn't matter if it's heavy or light, which is very unusual. You could do it with a foam disc, you could do it with a lead disc, same effect. You place it turning, huge disc, just turning underneath a tray where you're growing grass. And the grass will lean with the direction of the tray, that there's no physical contact. So that field effect, if you look at electromagnetic physics, it doesn't calculate. If you look at subatomic physics and torsion, it calculates very easily. You're seeing a physical effect with something that you can't easily measure or see with most systems. Once you know how to look at it, how to access it, it's a different story. So, but let me tie this to trafficking, children, society, the planet. Because Tika, you spurred my mind a little bit as we were talking about this, okay? Imagine a world where, let's just, let's start here. I talked about this the other day in a thing I did with Nino and went kind of long on it. But the highest altitude, yeah, well, Nino doesn't let me necessarily. I mean, Nino, with the hand cream. Oh, that was one of the funniest things we ever did. A lot of the people that we're watching that are involved in these bizarre things, for example, we had a relative of Epstein that came out here several months back, and she said that the whole family has a history of being Baal worshipers. Pretty bizarre. Okay, that's in the Epstein stuff. Epstein himself said he's a product of the Rothschild family. Oh, the Rothschild family did this wonderful thing. They worked out a deal in 1917 called the Balfour Declaration, and Lord Rothschild and Lord Balfour worked out a deal to allow the Jews to go in and buy land in the Palestine district controlled by England. And then with the purpose that if they get to enough land that they've purchased, they can then declare themselves a nation and reform the nation of Israel. You know, very post-Esther-esque in the Bible, where some of the people went back and they rebuilt and went back and occupied the city and the land. So imagine who would be somebody like the Rothschilds. Why would they do that? You know, there's lots of history where many of them are occultic. Well, there's all sorts of things. Christ himself said those are, you know, there's scripture. I didn't say Christ. There's many of those that say they're Jew, but they're not. Okay, and even the person running the temple at Christ's time, Caiaphas, did very, you know, ungodly things. So you can be in the church and put on all the right robes, and still it's a facade. It's not who you really are. You know, Christ himself challenged the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the temple leaders and said, "Ye are of your father, the devil." Okay, so they were claiming different fatherhood. In fact, if you go back, I'm going somewhere with this, so just stay with me for a second. It might take me a second to pull these pieces together, so I apologize. Imagine within cults, within the occult, you know, there's people that have a different flavors, like churches, it's like clubs, whatever. You got the Elks Club, you got the Moose Clubs, you got something else. Nothing against either of those. I'm just saying that, you know, people have a certain belief and then their actions follow their belief, okay? You can be part of a Protestant church and there's, you know, a dozen, 100 different flavors. Even the local church body, you can have two that belong to the same organization, but this one's kind of leans this way, more towards kids. This one's over in more of a retired community, same, you know, denomination, but they're quite a bit different, right? So within the cults, there is kind of a common theme. Many of them believe, and the cult of kings is that their real father is Cain, and that Cain's real father was Satan, Lucifer, the devil. That Satan, Lucifer, the devil had got into the garden, beguiled Eve. It was sexual in nature, and then the child of that beguiling was Cain. And then Eve taught Adam the trick, and then she became pregnant by two different persons in the same birth cycle. That Adam and Cain were born twins. Now, we don't have to believe that, okay? You don't have to get hung up. I don't see that in the Bible. Oh, sacrilege is wrong. No, we're talking about cults that all of them have different personal beliefs on this and kind of got a certain flavor. You can go into churches, you can go into, covens, and they all have a little different flavor of what they exactly believe. Well, no, you must be immersed. No sprinkling allowed. You must be immersed, full immersion if you're going to be baptized. That's the way it's done. It's in the Bible. Okay, well, but no, sprinkling is just fine. It's better. And the gases and the vapors and everything else. Different flavors. So in the cults, most of them have a core belief that Lucifer, this angel that was cast out of heaven, fell to earth. Christ said, I saw you fall to earth like lightning. Okay? And by the way, just one other thing, wherever Tika went, one other thing I wanted to mention. When you talk about frequency, what's one of the features that the scriptures refer to the devil? A lot of times when people talk about somebody that's broken mentally, who's not working right, who's gone crazy or something like that, who doesn't make sense, they used to talk about them having their pipes are broken, their pipes are cracked. In the scriptures, it refers to this fallen angel as having been in the throne room of God, and his very being was a pipe making music that he actually in his physical body had. It was an instrument. Frequency. Okay. When he did that, his frequencies were changed or damaged.
To that point, there's the dark light and the harmonic light. And in my training, what I've understood is most of the electromagnetic fields that we're using right now is the dark light, which is the same energy as fear, cancer. And that's where a lot of
that's why, Tika, you kind of sparked something for me. So I wanted to kind of go somewhere with this, and stay with me. It'll take a minute. I'm sorry. I'm trying to grab a bunch of stuff. I haven't, scripted anything out, but I'm just thinking of stuff that was shared. So, by the way, when she talks about colors and like that, when we look with cameras or when we use lasers, we use different kinds of lights for different types of effect. With certain lasers, I had a laser thing we were doing years and years and years and years ago. And the scientist that I was working with was very precise about the frequency of the light that we had to use. And it had to be within 2 angstrom. As soon as we deviated just the tiniest amount, it wouldn't do what we wanted it to do. And the short version is we were punching holes in concrete at like 30 miles. So it was pretty wild, and it had to be that precise. The different light, emits different frequencies, has very different effects. And if you can channelize it down to very different things. In fact, all of the aquariums that are out here around the world where they put food in and all that, you had the first killer whales and like that. A friend of mine was the guy that when they had Namu and then Shamu, the problem is you bring food in to feed the whale and he's in a big tank. You don't want to run the water from the area where these aquariums are at in from the area of water, because it might be polluted from septic tanks, from ships, other things, and you could just kill them with biological, get a bacterial bloom. So they're trying to filter water, but seawater has all sorts of mineralization in it that's needed. And so it's very hard to filter the seawater and keep it sterile enough, even with the food you bring in, because they're all eating raw, fish and like that, that could kill them. So what they did, Namu died, and it was ultimately a bacterial infection. and from being in this tank. So they stopped, because killer whales, there's not that many out there, and you didn't want to be killing them for research. And then they came up with a different way of doing it and had Shamu, the second one. And they put this huge bank in a room full of lights, and the lights emitted ultraviolet at 1160 angstrom. And that light sterilized the bacterials out of the water and the viral material out of the water without taking the mineralization out of the water. It was being sterilized by light, not by a filter. Okay. And we do the same thing with like the Legionnaire's disease. What was the cure for the Legionnaire's disease? It was in the air conditioning ducts. It was bacteria in viral material. And so what they do, they added a room after the air conditioner and around the radiators for the air conditioner systems and heat systems. Because, think of it, they're running moisture, they're running constant temperature. It's like a petri dish. Okay, you're growing all these biologicals in a petri dish. So they use light at 1160 angstrom to sterilize that air, keep the bacterial and biologicals from coming. And of course, light has a frequency, in this case, 1160 angstrom exactly. If you go too high, it doesn't have the same effect on the biologicals. If you go too low. So now think about it. I'm going somewhere with this. I promise. Okay, I'm going somewhere. So imagine, I'm just trying to get, you got to get in the mind of your enemy. Who are we fighting here really? Okay, what are we fighting here really? It's the kids, it's society, it's technology, it's the hospitals off on the wrong track, it's the guys doing 1,000 different things trying to control us. Well, what's the ultimate thing behind it? There's an evil entity behind this. That's where we come from a religious standpoint, good and evil, right? If you don't believe in evil, you think that it's all good. Well, I think that's a conversation. I think you're nuts, but so, but it's a conversation. So now we think about the garden. Adam and Eve are there. All the animals, all the plants, everything else. And there's an intruder in the garden. Well, in classical stuff, he sneaks in and he hides amongst the green leaves of the trees of the garden, camouflaged. And where's Adam? Remember, Eve was the one that was beguiled. Where in the world is Adam? Well, Adam's been around for a while. Classically, what the rabbis oftentimes will tell you is that there's a scripture that Noah's sin was as Adam's. What? Noah's sin was as Adam's? Yes, what he liked was the alcohol, get drunk. And so the conjecture is, there's no scripture really backs this up except this one little teeny snippet that Adam would occasionally go have some of the fermented fruit and go on a trip or whatever, or go to sleep. And he wasn't there. Where was he in the garden? It's a big garden. Where was he to protect Eve? See, Adam was older mentally. He was created long before Eve. He was the greatest scientist ever. He named all the plants, all the animals. He was given the earth and everything in it. And then he was given authority over everything in the earth that he was given. So he had to go learn about it. When his brain finally finished with all of this mapping of this gift that he was giving as he was growing, he got upset. I have checked everywhere. I looked under all the leaves, behind the rocks. I've organized the gardens. He wasn't, it says he was a kind of a groundskeeper for the garden. He was putting everything in place. He actually made it quite beautiful. It wasn't just random. He brought organization, civility, structure to the garden the way it was laid out. In all of that, he saw that all the animals, everything that's there, hey, there's nobody like me. Everybody else has paired off. I'm the only one like me. There's nobody with the same flesh as I have. When he realizes that, he gets put to sleep, and that's when God creates Eve out of his own flesh. This is my flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. And so Eve is exactly as Adam is. So now they're mates. But Adam was somewhere gone. And so wasn't there to protect Eve. He was much older. And so Eve was way younger. She's having to learn all this stuff. When they talk about weaker, she just didn't have, it's not that she didn't have the mental faculties, because she was made exactly like Adam as far as her mental abilities, etc. But she didn't have the history. And so she's having to learn from Adam.
Well, having been married now for 3 years, I can tell you right now, there's some stuff where there's still a learning. The question is which way it's going precisely, but
Jerry, can you give me a ride back home to the hotel later? I might need that. I might be walking. Anyway, so Eve, what was the temptation for Eve about this tree? If you eat of the fruit, you'll be like God, who taught Adam everything. He walked morning and evening with the Creator, which is Christ. Manifesting Christ said, I and the Father am one. He who has seen me has seen the Father. So God put on human flesh like we put on a jacket and walked amongst us. Okay. So Christ said, I and the Father am one. So you can't actually distinguish. Am I praying to the Father or am I praying to Christ? Am I praying to the Father? They're the one. It's just that for the expression, for the interaction, it's a human walking with us. That's Christ walking in the garden with Adam, walking across time, like we walk across the street. So Eve's temptation was, instead of having to learn everything from Adam and go through the steps to learn everything, she could eat of the apple and know all this difference between good and evil and what's going on. She could know it all. And Adam wasn't there right at the time. He said, no, I'll teach you, babe. Relax. And so let me jump ahead. She has Cain. Cain is within these occult groups, a hybrid. He's not merely human, he's more than human. He's human plus. We might say, well, he's less than human. From their perspective, he's more than human because he has the DNA or he has something in his being that is from his real father, okay? And if you look in the scriptures, by the way, there's nowhere where it attributes Cain to Adam. Doesn't list Cain as a child of Adam. So there's that. So Cain and Abel, half brothers, devil whispers in his ear, and if you get rid of Abel, you get everything. You and your seed. If you destroy Adam, see, where was Cain going after he killed Abel? By many of the counts, he's going to kill Adam next. And then the only way, and here's something, you guys have heard a lot of this wild stuff. One of the unique things amongst some of these families is that they intermarry within their own brothers and sisters and relatives, even the parents and like that. Why? Because they're mimicking something that they want to do, concentrating the DNA or something. And what is it? If Cain, after killing Abel, had been able to kill Adam, how would life go on the earth? What was human left? If Eve has sex with her own son, any child is a hybrid. Once Adam's dead, after Abel's dead, if there's no other descendants of Adam, you must have hybrids, or God's promise to Adam and his seed is gone. If you do bless the hybrids, now God has to bless that which he cursed. He has to reverse what he was going to do. He said, Satan, is cursed, cast out of heaven. Now all of a sudden, the curse is lifted. Remember, children and offspring is a blessing, right? That's what the father of the faithful is all about, Abraham. To have children, descendants, as the sand of the seashore for number, as the stars in the heaven, more than there's sand of the seashore for number. Yeah, that's the blessing. The devil understands it, so it goes right at the core of the whole heart of the matter for planet Earth, to go after who gets to own the earth, the offspring. So let me jump ahead now. Am I losing you guys? Are you with me? Am I going too slow? Okay, I'm trying to help you to kind of think, who's our enemy? What's going on here? Why attack the children? Why are the children so key? And I'm going to come back to frequency and other stuff in prisons and all sorts of things. Well, I'm getting there. You better hold on. You're getting ahead of the game here. My gosh, speeding at you. Want to do it? Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I'll answer some questions if you guys want to stay after. But okay, so here's the deal. Let's skip forward for a second. Something interesting in our world today. I've talked about it even just the other day. We have World Heritage sites all over the planet, for humanity. We have to preserve these things. UN World Heritage sites for generations to come. We got to save them all. So one site that's a World Heritage site is uniquely at the highest altitude of all World Heritage sites. And there was a couple other ones. There was one in Switzerland they wanted to do, and it was higher than this one. And they said, no, we won't do it because it's too high of an altitude. You can do it at the base of the mountain, not at the top. At the top of Mount Hermon, there's a World Heritage site, about a little under 6,000 feet. What does it commemorate? The whole world must honor this thing. It's so important to the world. It's so important. It's the highest altitude World Heritage site. What happened? At the top of Mount Hermon, the legend is that 200 aliens to Earth landed and then came down from the top of the mountain. Landed from where? I saw you fall like lightning from heaven. Landed at the top of Mount Hermon, went down to the base of Mount Hermon, and there they built a city. Mount Hermon's on the border between Israel and Syria. Okay? At the base of Mount Hermon, they built a city. You know what the city's name is? Baal. It's the city of Baal. And those that occupied the city were of stature, and their children were men of stature. They were very smart, they were very tall. Okay? And at a certain point in their legends, this isn't, this is other people's stuff. In their legends, we're reading their mail. So there's variations on this. So if you say it's just exactly this way. Well, in the Catholic Church, they teach it this way, and the Protestant, they teach it this way, and over this other one, they teach it this other way, okay? And it's like some of the semantics on the physics, you get to different groups. And what I like to refer to as a torsion effect, other people have different terms for it. It's the same effect, it's just a different name. A rose by any other name is still a rose. Whatever language it is, the rose didn't change. How you're referring to that rose may change. So these 200 were all male in their legend and preferred the company of each other, so it would appear maybe gay. But they knew that they were going to die without any offspring because of whatever. So they made a pact according to their legend. They made a pact, and the leader of their group said, we must essentially procreate with the humans. Some of the legends say it was with other animals also. So they may very well have had technology to allow them to do gene splicing and things like that, other things. But apparently they could have sex with, they chose for themselves of the women whoever they wished, and nobody could resist, okay? And had offspring. And the offspring were men of stature that were, giants. And they were men of renown. They had intellect. They were, in a very whatever society. The city of Baal at the base of Mount Hermon had gateways or doorways you could come through, and they were archways. And so we know that because one of them was preserved. Baal was destroyed by the humans at some point in time. And one of the archways was kept all down through the centuries until just a few years ago, when ISIS blew it up. But before ISIS blew up that doorway, it had been perfectly photographed and preserved, very high resolution photography in every angle, so it could be duplicated. And that archway, multiple archways now go on tour around the world. So we know kind of what the city was like. We know the layout, and it was a city that practiced child sacrifice. Okay? Now, we see in the scriptures in the Bible that the people coming into the promised land when they left Egypt, they were, told not to make their children to pass through the fire. That's a very church pulpit Sunday way of saying, don't roast your kids alive as a sacrifice. Like, I want that, okay? I don't want those kind of sacrifices. God doesn't want that. But the practice was in place. So he had to specifically tell them, don't offer your kids as sacrifices. And specifically there in Baal, what were they practicing? Child sacrifice. If you brought a child to these aliens, they could sacrifice it. And by the way, within the scriptures, what do they do with the meat from the sacrifices brought to the temple for offerings? They eat it. The priests eat it. So it's a reasonable thing to assume, and there is writings that back this up, that apparently after the children were brought for sacrifice, these Baal priests would eat the children. Now jump forward into a different location in Israel. What was the whole thing on top of the hill about with Elijah? Elijah went up there, had this thing challenging the priests of Baal. And he said, if God's with you guys and you're supposed to be doing these sacrifices, because they're in the middle, by the way, he proclaimed a drought because the people were so far out of whack with God. And the drought came on there, and it's 3-year drought. They're out of water. Everything's just horrible. So they want him to stop the drought. They recognized that he had spiritual power. Way with God, he could get something done when he asked God to do something. He asked for a drought and got it. Now they want him to ask God not to have the drought. And so he challenges the priests of Baal. And he says, on their turf, they always like to be on the tops of the mountains. Frequency, there's some stuff there, but it's also because they were cast down out of heaven. Why do they want to be in the high places? When you go to cities and you look for demonic architecture of things that are going on, the demons like the highest place in the city. Okay. We battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of darkness in high places. And there's physically high, which they like, but there's also politically high. There's also business high, science high. There's different states that they want to be in. So then, in this challenge, the priests of Baal build an altar and they're going to just ask God to bring down lightning, take the sacrifice, and show that God likes them. And Elijah's going to do the same thing and see if he can get God to take his sacrifice. But it was on the top of the mountain. It was at the power point of the energy grid, if you will, or the demonic, where these guys had carefully put their altar at the top of the hill and they're having people bring their children and sacrifice them to Baal, Moloch. In Israel? Yeah, they're totally mentally captured. Can you imagine how baked and twisted you would have to be as a society to allow that to happen? And then in a highly visible place where everybody can see what's going on. You can see the fire burning. Everybody in the town knows it. Well, I wouldn't take my kid up there. Well, you wouldn't get favor. You wouldn't necessarily get protection. And it's still a resonance coming from whatever was going on at Baal before the city of Baal was destroyed. Somebody else figured it out and destroyed it. But the practice is still going on there in the land. This is still in the same region. And so they go up on top of the thing, they're cutting themselves, they're making all the noise, the chants, the you know, it's insane. It's like a rock concert on steroids, right? The screaming and everything else. And Elijah's laughing at them. You know, scream louder, cut louder. Is your God taking a potty break? Is he up yet? Where is he? I don't see him. You know, come on, let's go. God, it's getting late. Wait already. Finally, he's ready to go. He says, okay, let me do this. No. You can't go do your thing yet. You've probably got pyrotechnics hidden in your altar here. We're sure of that. You've done it because you're going to try and fool us that God actually is going to support you. Oh, so you think I had pyrotechnics? What do you think they had in their fire? Now, why were they so upset? Their fire hadn't gone if the pyrotechnics weren't working. I guarantee you they had a no failure policy on this. And so, you know, I said, all right, let's go and put some water on it. Water on it is a very precious commodity. They're in the middle of a drought. not if the pyrotechnics weren't working. I guarantee you they had a no failure policy on this. And so, I said, all right, let's go and put some water on it. Water on it is a very precious commodity. They're in the middle of a drought. People are practically dying from the drought. So water's a big deal. They grab water, they douse the fire. Oh, is it, wet enough? Yeah, you sure? It does it 3 times. And they're at the top of the hill. Where's the water come from? Who go gets it? The priest of Baal. Okay, here's some more. Can you imagine? Because I want to be thorough. It's good water. I have a sip before I finally throw it on the thing. When Elijah prays, the whole thing is consumed literally with like a nuclear blast. With all the people who had sacrificed their own children. So when he wanted with the Creator, which is Christ, manifesting, Christ said, I and the Father am one. He who has seen me has seen the Father. So God put on human flesh like we put on a jacket and walked amongst us. Okay, so Christ said, I and the Father am one. So you can't actually distinguish. Am I praying to the Father or am I praying to Christ? Am I praying to the Father? Am I praying to the Father? They're the one. It's just that for the expression, for the interaction, it's a human walking with us. That's Christ walking in the garden with Adam, walking across time, like we walk across the street. So Eve's temptation was, instead of having to learn everything from Adam and go through the steps to learn everything, she could eat of the apple and know all this difference between good and evil and what's going on. She could know it all. And Adam wasn't there right at the time. He said, no, I'll teach you, babe. Relax.